Good evening, everyone. My name is Renee LaBelle. I'm your host tonight. I see a few new faces, so I'm always curious to see who's here for their very first time. Okay, welcome. How'd you find out about us? Awesome, that's great. And I'm sure you've got this memorized because there's a quiz at the end. So, but just know that this and many other sessions have been video recorded, and you can watch these online at your leisure and get PDUs that way. I think we've got about 35 now online. This is the third Tuesday of the odd month, or the Applied Project Management Speaker Forum. Tonight, we have a really interesting speaker who's not in the IT sector. He's in the home building sector. So we've never had a home builder before. And he shared a little bit of trivia. He's been in 3 movies back in 1999. And he said they were all terrible action movies. So I hope he'll share a little bit with that in his own comments. Brandon has family and has 4 kids. They spend time up in the Canadian River, which, of course, I'm from Canada, and I thought that was in Canada. But anyway, when the first time I went to Oklahoma, I was like, "You have a Canadian river? How did that happen?" So, and I would just like to turn it over now to Brandon, and let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. My 10-year-old daughter was calling me just a few minutes ago, frantic because she couldn't get a hold of my wife, and it's kind of ironic because when she's asked what her dad does for a living, she says that I talk on my cell phone, and I think that's probably a fair description, but I kind of say I've got a really unique job, and it's hard to relate outside of my industry. So I just say that I'm a facilitator of action and a driver of excellence to improve profitability. And is there any MBA students here this evening? Just okay. Well, hopefully some of the MBA students will watch this video because part of my presentation, I wanted to direct it to them because, like we just discussed, a lot of you may be in the IT industry. When I first started the project management program, I kind of felt lost, and I didn't really know if that was a right fit for me and really how I related to just the disciplined environment of the finite procedural IT environment that most of my peers were talking about in class. And my environment was more agile and where we fixed something when we saw something, and we just reacted immediately. But my transformation really began when I was molding my thought processes to adapt to my abilities to effectively manage any type of project within any type of business discipline, and I stopped worrying about my grades. Like, I can't tell you if I got an A or A minus or A plus in any class because I just tried to focus with a growth mindset and focus on incorporating what I was learning in the MBA program into what I was doing right then and there, and not waiting until I had the MBA or the education to get those benefits. So I saw those benefits really early, and that resulted in increased promotions and new responsibilities with the company. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the program and really acknowledge the fact of how the program sort of created a guidebook for some tremendous success that I've been able to experience since then. So tonight I want to share just a few stories of my journey. It's going to be at a high level and just looking down from 30,000 feet, and then open it up for dialogue and questions in the end so that we could dig a little deeper and go into the details of sort of my explanation. I work for a top 10 publicly traded home builder here locally. I'm not here on behalf of my company, so I'll leave my company's name out of it and just sort of talk about my journey and how it relates to project management in our school and the project management program. But a little background on that, we operate in 140 different communities in 24 markets in 14 different states. 30% of our revenue is derived from the Dallas-Fort Worth and the Houston markets. And we have a broad product diversification. 38% of our sales are to a move-up buyer. 26% are for a first-time home buyer. 19% is our luxury products. And 17% is an active adult lifestyle that's really focused towards a 55 and older customer. And my experience at the company has been managing the construction staff, the sales teams, and the operational activities, and all related to constructing new homes in Dallas-Fort Worth. And the new roles were led to profit participation bonus compensation, and that was a huge driver for me, and which led to increased profits or increased annual income. And so that's what originally seeing that potential and possibility drew my interest in profitability. And my peers and I like to kind of describe ourselves as some of the luckiest guys in the world because in our position, we kind of take the approach of home building, sort of comparing it to like a professional sport. Like professional athletes, we get to do what we love with passion every day. Every decision that we make is very competitive against our competition, and it has a significant impact on profitability. And we're in competition against other professionals to drive to beat them. And like the deals and trades that we make today, they impact our future position in the market. And I like to say that we try to make the Baker Mayfield deals without the Cleveland Browns reputation. And when we make great deals, sometimes we end up getting grossly overpaid. And but most importantly, we get to deliver an exceptional customer experience. We deliver an emotional and a lasting impact for years to come. We're a catalyst to family memories, and we're publicly graded by the decisions that we make and the execution of our expertise. Tonight I'm going to share with you a little bit about the behind the scenes of the operations of a home building company, sort of what separates us, my secret company, from our peers, and what's driving our strategies locally, and how we have adapted an operational excellence philosophy and the results of those actions and our future positions related to that. A little bit about trends in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, and then I'm going to open it up for questions to dig deeper if you so desire. But behind the scenes, Dallas-Fort Worth is arguably the most competitive home building market in the United States. There's more home building companies in Dallas-Fort Worth than any other market. And our company's technology integration is greater than any other company in America. And you may be surprised to know that we're the first company to integrate Gantt scheduling within a residential construction program. We use a BuildPro project management scheduling system that integrates pay points, defect entry, and punch list items where a defect can be identified, and then a picture can be taken, and that's communicated with all of the vendors and suppliers and contractors so that they can make that repair, and that repair can be completed prior to the payment of their activity. And then the other side of that scheduling system is called Supply Pro, and it's a scheduling and projection system on the vendor side. They're able to access the blueprints for the projects that they're working on with us, identify change orders, and it's a communication between the field personnel and directly with our purchasing department. Some things that we do a little bit differently is some of you may have purchased new homes or existing homes and gotten a third-party inspection done before you closed on the home. And so we do a third-party inspection, a quality inspection on our homes at every house when the house is at frame stage prior to insulating or installing sheetrock. It's just an extra step that we take for our quality control management and a record that we have a third party just documenting that we've established and met all of our quality standards that we've set for ourselves. Energy efficiency is really important in today's homes, and it's real confusing to know what separates one builder from another, what may make one home more efficient or better than the other. And so a standard scoring system is called HERS. It's Home Energy Ratings System, and we perform that on every home. Not every home builder actually takes that step and can make that claim, but we can tell you on every home that we close what the actual score was on that. And that's the way to identify a level playing field of home efficiency in a home that's completed. And one thing that we've also created that separates us from some of our peers is we developed a Gold Key program, and this was just a way to provide an unmatched customer experience throughout the life cycle of our project. And it's touch points where we're meeting with our customer prior to the project start, weekly progress and touch points on a weekly basis throughout the construction process. We meet them at their home when the house is framed, prior to sheetrock covering and moving forward with the finish out. And we do a third-party quality control inspection at the end of our homes, and then we perform an orientation with our customer. It really creates the feeling of involvement with our customers, and it just provides extra exceptional customer service throughout the whole process. Instead of feeling lost and seeking us out, we make sure that we have a communicated timeline that they're involved in and a part of throughout the whole process. And I want to change the direction for just a moment and kind of share an analogy that we'll circle back to at the end. But I don't have any sort of geologist type background, but my years on this earth has taught me that diamonds are a girl's best friend. And my wife has shared with me that flawless diamonds are loved even more. And what makes diamonds so special? Well, it's due to a total internal reflection. And during normal reflection, only part of the total energy in the light is reflective. Part is scattered and part is reflected. But a flawless diamond shines more brilliantly because in total internal reflection, there are no defects that's interrupting. Everything is reflected. There's nothing scattering that reflection. So that analogy sums up our strategic focus on improving profitability and identifying any flaws and striving towards a more brilliant shine of profitability success. A catalyst that really drove our focus of profitability was really based off a position of survival. Coming out of the housing recession 10 years ago. Sales and profits were down, and we had to find new ways to capture profit dollars. As an MBA student and a fresh MBA, I found myself among long-tenured peers and new group-level leadership that we realized that we had to make reductions in force, but that wasn't enough to influence profits during this crisis, and it wasn't where we needed to be to position ourselves to survive. And there's many companies that we interacted with that didn't make it through that downturn, and it's been a real pivotal point in my career. And it was difficult, and it pushed a lot of us out of our comfort zones. And I personally believe that a byproduct of long tenure is a lack of innovation. And this really drove and forced us to stop doing what we were used to and stop doing what we were comfortable with and just, the habits that we were used to performing. And we were forced to immediately make a drastic change. And our group president has some driving operating principles that we're all very well aware of. And to quote the way he would describe it is we had to get in the weeds. We had to analyze our business from the inside and out. We had to intensely evaluate our market position, and we had to make immediate adaptations to our impending challenges. We had to walk away from some of our projects. We had to make really tough, difficult decisions, and part of our reduction in forces was getting rid of really great people. And what do you do? How do you decide when you've got so many great people? It's easy to get rid of some of your low performers, but when it gets as tight as it got for us, and when you're evaluating great people, and how do you know which one of the great people do you get rid of? And that was an example of one of those challenges. And we began a cultural shift, and that's a big driver of what my presentation is about. And it's about measuring everything that's important to the business. We're faced with transitioning away from installing anything and everything a customer was willing to pay for in a home. That was always, if you wanted to pay for it, we'd do it. And we thought that we'd double the price and we'd make really high margins off of these custom options. But what we transitioned to was pre-planned options. We started to analyze that we had thousands and thousands of options that our purchasing department was managing and keeping up with the takeoffs, and so many of them were not being purchased. People weren't choosing those. We started to analyze what these custom options that we were choosing, and we weren't making the margins that we thought we were. And what we transitioned to was predetermined options that had predetermined profit margins. And the interesting thing is that was a very difficult transition for our sales teams, because saying yes is the easy way to a sale, and nobody wants to tell a customer no. And I like to say sometimes that Pinterest is the cancer of the internet in my industry, because they get all these great, beautiful ideas that just don't always work. They may not work with the floor plan. They may not, just because you see it on some house flipping show doesn't mean that it's a trend, and it's not a wise choice. But we were in the business of pleasing, and we transitioned away from that. And sales had a struggle with that for a couple of years, and then we started to see the impact that it didn't stop us from making sales. It just what it did is it pushed us in a different direction of the way that we made the sale and the way that we handled objections, and we had to dig a little bit deeper. When somebody came in with this great idea, we started asking questions and figuring out the whys. Why do you want that? How do you live in your home? How can we find what you're trying to accomplish through this? And it led to greater satisfaction. Because if somebody has this idea that they found on Pinterest, or they've got this concept of their mind, how do we know that we're on the same page? Are we seeing what they're trying to create in their home? And chances were, usually we weren't. It was very difficult to meet their expectations, and sometimes we ended up building things twice. And we found that we were able to build our houses quicker because we were more efficient. We had our takeoffs, all these predetermined options with these excellent profit margins just made things go smoother. And what we also started doing is charging exorbitant fees for late change orders, because previously it was a yes. Our answer was always yes. And whether that slowed the project down, whatever it did, we would try to make a price to make a handsome profit. But sometimes we would just do it for the sake of the spirit of customer service. And it was often to our detriment and would erode at our margins. And we found that, we would reduce our production cycle time. Customers didn't come and look at our product with frustrations because it was not what, the expectations that we agreed upon. And what we found was that now all of a sudden our back office, our purchasing department, is only focused on managing these options that we're only going to offer. So all of our estimating became more accurate. And we reduced our budget variances, and just everything began to run smoother. So what we also did, in addition to that, is we kind of analyzed, our start to finish process with the customer. When you sign a contract, we broke down all the different periods in which you're interacting. Whereas we looked at signing the contract, all the activities that you have to perform in between signing the contract and starting the construction of the home. And typically, we were just measuring from the start of the construction of the home until the completion of the construction of the home. And we weren't measuring some of the black hole of time that we had in the beginning process. And even sometimes after we finished the home, there was a large gap from finishing home to when we actually closed on the home and recognized the revenue. So we found wasted black holes of time that weren't being measured. So we started measuring them. And one example that I can share of that is when somebody writes a contract for the home, you want to know when you move in. Well, we're not measuring that beginning time, and so oftentimes our projections were inaccurate because we weren't disciplined with that beginning stage because we weren't measuring ourselves. One example of an improvement that we made as a project coordinator, I said a lack of long tenure is a lack of innovation. Well, this project coordinator, we challenged everyone in the different processes as how can you reduce your cycle time? Where can you make improvements? Where can we capture time which would lead to profitability? And so many people just thought, I'm doing the best I can. It's what they're used to. It's what they've been doing for so long. So I went with the project coordinator, and with one city, the city of Fort Worth, it's terribly slow and inefficient with receiving permits. And so we met with the third party that performs all of our permitting, and I just asked a simple question that, what can we do differently to improve the time frame of when we get the permits from you? It's a really crazy, simple question. And they said, oh, really simple. All you have to do is submit everything online. Well, our project coordinator was so used to making copies and doing everything that she was just used to doing. It was her process and her checklist that she was following, that she never took the time to think of that question or ask that question. And we reduced our permitting time by 50%. We went from 6 weeks to 3 weeks. And it was just unbelievable, and I felt really stupid that I had never thought of that before either. But we started digging deeper into, we send our customers to our design center. So we set timelines. We set timelines with our sales staff of when you write a contract, you schedule your meeting with the design center at that point. What we were finding is when we analyzed it, sometimes it was taking 2 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks before they were getting in and meeting their schedules with the design center. And we just decided that we're going to make those decisions when the customer is most excited about the purchase and at the time of the contract. And we reduced a huge amount of time by just requiring that as just a part of our purchasing process. And we changed our change order process. We would get change orders all the way up until after the house had started. We were in the business of saying yes to anything and everything at any request. And so we started setting expectations and said that you need to have your decisions made. Certain parts of your decision need to be made at the time of purchase. And then we've got a red line meeting where all of the structural changes need to be met. And we had another deadline that we created that was open-ended before. But that was other parts of the process that we were able to minimize and create that contract to start process that became measurable, and we felt really silly that we had never thought about that, and we were just gluttonous. We were happy with all the money that we were rolling around in, because sales were easy, and we started making these changes when sales weren't so easy anymore. We had to find new ways to find profitability. We started adapting our floor plans. What's a more modern layout? Trends are changing. Not everybody wants a formal living room. Not everybody wants a formal dining room, for that matter. But some interesting things that we've figured out is to try to, I mentioned some of the pre-planned options. Well, we changed some features that we all think are probably standard, and this was controversial with our sales staff in the beginning. But what we did is in some of our products, we made master bathtubs an option. It was not an included standard feature for our home. And we made fireplaces an option, that if you wanted that, you chose that. And interestingly enough, we found that so many people did not want a master bathtub. They wanted a huge walk-in shower, and that became our standard. We had wasted dollars in building a bathtub and a shower, and we could give a feature that people were asking for by making a master bathtub no longer standard. And our sales team had such a hard time with that because our competition ate us alive. They're just like, are you kidding me? They're not going to include a bathtub, and that was a challenge for them to handle that objection. But in the end, it's quite interesting to evaluate how many people do not choose a master bathtub, and they want that real estate of that wall back, because in North Texas, how many of us actually use our fireplaces? I wish I would have been smart enough to not put a fireplace in my home, because it's often a corner that just limits the way we can decorate our furniture in our home. But now that I see those options as not being standard, I don't know that I would want a fireplace in my next home. But just really digging deeper and looking at the standards that we were used to, and trying to kind of push ourselves outside of our comfort zone to see, where we could take that. All of these transitions really pushed us into a new measured and professional environment. I talked a moment ago about just rolling in cash. In 2006, 2007 in Dallas, home builders were throwing money around like we were inside a cash machine. Like truly, people would walk in the door and buy a $500,000 house, and the next person behind them would do the same thing. I had a project in Las Colinas where we had 54 houses that were all in the $400,000 to $600,000 range under construction all at one time. And we had another competitor that had the same amount of houses going. It was complete chaos, but it was just one of the most unique experiences I've had in my entire career. But we focused on operational improvements and efficiencies that eventually drove us to greater profits with fewer actually unit deliveries. So what's the difference? And it really zeroes in to one word, and it's accountability. Accountability was a driving factor to our increased profits. We created a cultural shift with a detailed plan for expectations. It began with just setting those expectations and measuring those expectations to make sure that they were actually being achieved. We sat down with the team to kind of explain what we were doing. We explained why we were doing it, what their contribution is, and why their contribution is important and critical for our success. See, this cultural shift was critically dependent upon their buy-in. I believe that sometimes when we set goals, we sometimes assume that everyone understands those goals. We often don't explain the why behind it. So I clearly established everyone's role in this mission, and I explained the why behind it. I made sure that everyone understood that their ability to impact this and where their purpose was within that why of what we were going to accomplish. And I established a team with a very collective approach, which interestingly transitioned into a neat transition of peer influence, where everyone was influencing everyone's other desire to competitively deliver their best. And this cultural shift was far more important to me I had to drive the belief system within my team, and so that they believed their performance was important, but I had to make them believe that they were truly the part of the solution. This peer pressure extension was really interesting because it extended to multiple business units. So what we started to do is started measuring our sale to the construction start time that we had previously ignored. We started comparing our variances with the other business unit variances. And this helped us recognize our revenue sooner. And we were completing our projects earlier. It reduced the interest expense dollars that we had invested in each of those projects. And we started measuring the complete to the close period. Oftentimes, we saw that we may complete our project, but maybe the mortgage wasn't finalized. Maybe there was some part of, well, they have a house to close, their purchaser hasn't got their mortgage wrapped up in time, and so we're sitting with interest dollars eating away at our profits while we're waiting for them to get their part of the deal worked through. So we started managing that process and evaluating that process as well. We started evaluating our starts and our closing deviation. By using the standard deviation formula, we looked at how much variation or dispersion that we varied from our projections and our commitments to our projections. We looked at our budget variances, and we measured ourselves amongst the other business units in our group. And we changed our philosophy of a variance isn't an estimating variance or a purchasing department's variance or a field personnel's department's variance. A budget variance is a budget variance, and we're all responsible of driving budget variances away. When we were doing our custom options, our budget variances were on average about $9,000 per house that we built, and that's just obscene. When I was determining prices for homes, I just had a little fluff built in, knowing that I'm thumbing it that we're going to be off maybe 10 grand, and that was just included in the price to the customer because I knew we were that far off. Well, within the last year, we've reduced our budget variances to well below $1,000 a house, and we're closer to $500 a house, and that's just an incredible amount of reduction over the last couple of years. And other things we did was adjusted our bonus compensation to align with the new goals and align everyone within the management system and all levels to align how our compensation was going to be, so we could drive some of the other levels to achieve the levels that we're all trying to achieve together and get unity and everybody to have skin in the game. And we really focused on a people-driven focus. I look at things as I'm only as good as a team. And I'm a representative of my team's efforts. And I'm only as good of a leader as the leaders that I create. I'm responsible for me, my team's performance, and the buck stops with me. And it rests on my shoulders. And I live my life and my job that I'm prepared to lose it. And I'm not afraid to lose my job because I know no matter what, I'm going to do the right thing. And I accept responsibility for all of my actions, and my staff knows that, and I make sure that they know that they're our most important asset, and I make sure that they feel like it. Acknowledgement is important, and so many times people don't take the time to do that. There's times when people leave companies. Why? Sometimes it's their manager. A lot of times it's not their company. People leave managers. Sometimes it's not about money. Sometimes it's just about acknowledgement of their contribution and what they do. And so that was important to really drive everybody together and to acknowledge that we're all trying to do the same thing. And it's been really crazy how much how my job has gotten so ridiculously easy by just creating that culture, and how what happens when I'm not around, and when everyone else is helping manage each other that way. And I can't take credit for this. I had an operational review with our now COO, and it was very impactful for me, because he told us that, every decision that you make, that it was my peers and I, but I want you to think about what discussions that your associates or the contractors that we review, what kind of discussions at the dinner table each night that they may have about you. And in the homes that our company builds, we have on average about 300 different contractors that work on our homes. And I know a lot of them personally and by name, but we started thinking about if I make a bad decision and that impacts our profitability, if it's a bad land position, if our units are reduced because of decisions that we make, how is that going to influence the laborer that's framing our houses, or the mason that's installing the brick? Will they be able to afford maybe shoes for their children, or something to that level? But he really painted the picture of the importance of acknowledging and understanding everyone within all of our influence and those decisions that we make. And with talking again back on the peer influence and where our new focus went, we were transitioning from a growth mode to a focus on profitability. Before, when people are just walking through the door and you're just handing over the paperwork to fill out the sales contracts, we were really focused on units. I mean, how many units were we building? We're in competition with the other home builders. Who was getting the most units in the market was winning the game. And it wasn't necessarily the most units was making the most profit. We transitioned away from the units because we had to walk away from some of the bad land deals, because some of those were just there for cash flow purposes, and we had to focus on only the deals that were highly profitable. We had to focus on quality and respect within the community, because then with the downturn, so many companies were going out of business. We had to really protect our reputation and distinguish ourselves from what was happening in our industry. And we really began to strongly focus on home energy efficiency. What's hidden inside the walls? That's what separates a home builder from another home builder, is the quality that's covered up by the beauty of the sheetrock and the light fixtures and everything that you don't see. And all those things that you don't see don't give you value on an appraised value of a home. It's just a matter of what you ethically do to provide the best value to your customer. Some of those examples include one thing that we did differently that has had a great improvement is we looked at, we may have, I'll say we're building in 50 different communities across, Dallas-Fort Worth. We could have 15 different installation crews that may be installing our windows 15 different ways, and we're dependent on our field personnel to manage the quality and hopefully make sure they did it right, and that you just can't always do that. So we spent a little bit more money and transitioned to a turnkey window installation, and we set the standards that we wanted to make sure every installation met. And then now it was the manufacturer that was installing those. And it's a little controversial because it cost us a lot more money to do this, but our warranty costs and our leaks, I couldn't begin to tell you the last time I've heard of a window leaking, and within a couple of years even, since we made that change. But we spent more money to have better quality, but ultimately saved us more money and led to more profitability because our warranty dollars weren't eroding from our profits. We began testing all of our homes. I mentioned earlier about a HERS score and identifying quality. We really wanted protect our reputation and really drive quality and distinguish ourselves. So we paid the money to score every home we build and to be able to provide a certificate to our customers so they can represent that it's not a part of a sampling, but that their home actually qualified with the HERS score that we market and commitment to our customers. And we were forced to kind of anticipate like market trends and look at deals differently than the way that we were before. I mentioned some of our deals were for cash flow. Sometimes, you just want to maintain cash flow. And we were not in a position to do that anymore. We had to focus on profitability. So we had to admit when we made a bad deal. We had to walk away from a few bad deals. We had to not go forward in a few deals and just allow someone else the opportunity to take advantage of those bad deals. And some of the trends and the challenges that we're currently facing, and it's really unique. And our Dallas market is different than some of our markets in our 14 other states. But in Dallas-Fort Worth, the job growth since February of 2018, there's been about 100,000 jobs created every month since then. 78.5% of that's in Dallas, and 21.5% of that's in Fort Worth and Arlington. That represents a year-over-year 35% increase. Now, the past 4 years, a lot of that growth has been primarily Dallas and Plano and Irving and Collin County. Collin County was the hottest real estate market, and it may be the worst market right now. And I'll get to that in a second. But this growth led to an oversaturation because homebuilders were chasing those purchasers. And they were focused on building expensive homes that had nice, comfortable profits built within them. So the development deals in Collin County in particular were all very high-priced homes. And so it led to an oversaturation of high-priced homes. And you can shop many communities in that area right now and enjoy up to $100,000 discounts because there's so many spec homes due to this oversaturation in the market. Another problem that we have is just affordability as a challenge. It's just the prices of existing home sales, not just new home sales, have just gone crazy. And our customer base is eroding because of the affordability factor. And we've had Toyota, we've had all these great companies that are relocating here and consistently relocate here, but there's only a finite number of people that can afford a $500,000 and greater home price. And so we've transitioned to trying to build a more affordable product. Dallas has a lag in lot development with comparison to their construction starts. We have a serious problem with the delivery of lot developments. And that's really hurting our profitability as well. I've managed a portfolio of neighborhoods. People in my position, there's several of us, and you manage the sales, the construction, and all the operational activities with profit and loss responsibility. So when you've got a new project, I have one project in particular, we had $1 million of earnest money. So the way that some of our financing works within our company is I essentially borrowed $1 million from our company as earnest money for this project, that with the agreement that this project was going to open, with a specific time frame at 12% interest. And essentially 1% is paid each month, and that's why we come up with the 12%. But that project was 18 months late, and of when those lots were delivered to us, which even extended when we were able to even start it. So 18 months in, we're already deeply in the hole just with the interest erosion. Some of the problems with this lot delivery is our labor force. they're really limited. Believe it or not, the border, information that we hear in the news every day has had a significant impact. Our labor pool comes from Mexico. Well, just be honest that our home prices are directly correlated with the fact that we have a very inexpensive labor force directly from Mexico. But our border security has gotten much tighter. A lot of our contractors during the downturn, they went back to Mexico or they moved to other markets and they never came back. When our market recovered in Dallas, our labor pool did not recover with it. And so this finite amount of labor has just jacked up their labor prices, and which in turn increases our home prices. And we literally don't have enough contractors that the developers are all fighting each other for the dirt contractors that are creating the lots that we're all sitting waiting on. And municipalities are their own worst enemies right now. They've created lengthy and overcomplicated entitlement and development processes that just further delays some of these lot deliveries. And we have an epidemic of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. And with social media and just community involvement, it's very surprising how active people in our communities are against new developments. And the elected officials listen. And when our worst enemy in my industry is a newly elected official, because they're so sensitive to the people that voted for them, and it just erodes our opportunity to get some of our deals done, and it takes longer. And our pro formas that when we made our decisions to go into the deal are often eroded when they get hung up with the municipalities, and it pushes out the delay, and we're paying interest on this high dollar earnest money that we had put forth. So all this delays just makes it more difficult to deliver an affordable product to our customer, and it's a great challenge. And what I can say that's happening right now is that same oversaturation of that higher end product. All those people are reacting, and they're seeing that some of our communities that we've started, that we've got really great sales success because we've got to a more affordable product. Everyone else is copying that, and so now it's made it more competitive. It's better for the customer because you're including more features. And I'm shocked at what's included for a certain price today versus what was included 5 years ago. There's so many things that we've had to not include because of our lot prices that have just gone up astronomically. Another threat I'm going to say a couple of things that this is a Brandon Tatta idea. This is nothing more than something that I see that I hope someday I am not right for. But I want to talk about like the mortgage industry. Our interest rates have been low for so long, and cash out refinancing loans. That's a problem. And in 2013, Stephen Laufer, he's a professional staffer at the Federal Reserve Board. He published a paper called Equity Extraction and Mortgage Default. And his paper essentially says that the mortgage defaults in Los Angeles County were caused by cash out refinancing, really much greater than any other factor. And you see, Los Angeles County and Orange County, that was the epicenter of the housing bubble. And from 2000 to 2007, California home prices almost tripled. And in that same period, roughly 5 times as many of the loans were for refinancing versus homes from new purchases. And in Los Angeles and Orange County, in that metro area, there's approximately 13 million people. And out of 13 million people, between 2004 and 2007, there was 2.7 million refinances. That resulted in $627 billion. So the caveat to that is that 90% of those defaults were the mortgage debt at the time of the original purchase was less than the amount that they actually defaulted. Think about that for a second. That's pretty crazy. So as our prices continue to rise, and we compare locally with what we see happening, and how is that? I believe that's a threat that we have to acknowledge and that we have to consider, because our interest rates are at a historical level. They've been there for a while. Even with the fluctuation, it's still at a great affordable interest rate. And with our rising land costs and our rising home prices, it's just stirring up a little bit of trouble, in my opinion. And in Dallas-Fort Worth, we've experienced a really extensive urban sprawl. In the last 40 years, the North Texas population has more than doubled in population. We're now almost 7.4 million people. And that growth has mostly been suburban. JLL is a real estate investment corporation, released a report that suggested that the pace and pattern of Dallas's rapid growth has turned the region into the new Los Angeles. It could be strangled by traffic, infrastructure, and affordability problems. It's a true concern that I see, that it's a threat that I acknowledge, and that it impacts the decisions that I make on a daily basis. Another decision, and what my competition is it's not just the other new home builders, it's the resales. It's the existing homes. And when we're looking at pricing for a new community, I have to really take into consideration what you can get on an existing home, and what's the time on the market. And they've just seen astronomical increases in where I live alone. I'm blown away at what I paid for my home and what they're selling for now. I've seen 4 houses on my street in the last 30 days be listed and sold. And I live in a unique area that sells really quickly, but these prices are unsustainable. But our resale market, it continues to just be really strong. And sometimes that's what some of our specific communities struggle with the most, of what you can get for your money versus the premium of getting a new home. So resales, again, are some of our stiffest competition. So I like to use the analogy that we were in home building almost like professional athletes. And like professional athletes, we've got to adapt to that and adapt to their offerings, and we've got to beat them. And so where are we headed? We made the decision to adapt and transition to a more affordable product, and really find those more affordable lot prices. It's been ignored for several years. And we have got to look at the demographic considerations and the market trends and really think about who is our customer. Is it a millennial? Affordability is a factor. The location is very important. Now, how do you get it out of their parent? How do you get the millennial out of their parents' house? But they want technology. They want smart homes. So we're now partnering with a company called Brilliant, and we're going to build every home a smart home. And there's a lot of, that's a trend with different home builders, but you're going to be able to control everything from an app on your phone, and all of our houses are now going to, that's going to be an included feature. You can't get a bathtub, but you can get a smart house. So who else is our customer? Baby boomers. That is really possibly our most important customer right now. Parents, they're downsizing. And to what? They're used to this large house, it sure is hard for them to, when they want to downsize and they have to figure out what they do with all this big furniture, and it's always humorous to watch when they purchase that smaller house, because it's a painful transition. But hopefully some of them downsize enough that they can keep their millennials out of their house. But so one thing that we've done is we have started offering in every community a multi-generational floor plan. And so it is something that it's got its own little kind of casita. Maybe you'll have 2 front doors at the front, but you'll have a bedroom, you'll have a living room, and maybe a little top loading washer dryer and a kitchenette in there so that maybe your parents can move in. We've got a very multicultural customer now, many of which their parents move in and help raise their children. So we've offered that. This is very attractive to them. And sometimes building 2 master bedrooms, and we call it an owner suite now. Actually, we've sort of transitioned away from calling it a master bedroom, and we'll say that there's an upstairs owner suite and a downstairs owner suite, or an owner suite in the front and one in the back. But we've adapted our product offering for that. One thing that we've found great success with is to try to find that lower lot price is we've transitioned into infill projects. We've got one in downtown Dallas right now. We've had one at near City Hall, and it was a partnership with the city of Irving and the developer and us, and it was pent-up demand. Who would have thought in downtown Irving, near City Hall, that we could build $300,000 to $400,000 houses and finish, start to finish, 32 homes within 1 year? And raising prices and improving our margins all that time. But if you think about it, there's people that have lived in that community that never have had the opportunity to stay within that community and upgrade to a new home. And so I got it all wrong whenever I was trying to identify who our customer was, because I thought, it might be the hipster that maybe wants to go out in downtown Dallas but can just go straight up Irving Boulevard, and maybe it's somebody from the hospital district that wants a new home but wants to get outside the 635 zone. And where could you get a $300,000 new home in that area? You can't. It doesn't exist. And an interesting thing, it was a very diverse customer base, and a lot of baby boomers that actually purchased there. And a lot of times they want a lock and leave lifestyle. They don't want maintenance. They don't want a big yard. We didn't have big yards there, and they don't want that liability of that work and everything. And so that was something that I did not think would be so interested. And we have a project just down the road, actually, with the same floor plans that's probably one of our most successful neighborhoods right now that is it's focused on that. I mentioned that Collin County was really hot. Northwest Fort Worth might be one of the hottest construction activities in the Metroplex. It's really interesting how there's pockets of it. It's off 287 out by the Federal Mint, if you know where that is. That whole corridor off 287 is just blowing and going with countless new homes. Down in Mansfield, Midlothian, that's a really hot area. And so it's creating new business districts, and it's just really interesting how far out that we're getting. We've got projects in Van Alstyne now, and Salina, in places that you'd think you're almost in Oklahoma. And that's where the sprawl for affordable land has gotten us now. Some other factors to consider are political and economic threats. Trade war, and we hear about that all the time, but that's been a real threat to our industry. And in Business Week, October 1st edition, it's quoted as saying that in March, President Trump began the international trade war by announcing a 25% tariff on foreign steel and a 10% on aluminum. So the U.S. still produces 2/3 of its own steel, but it imports 85% of its aluminum. And through September of last year, companies had paid $625 million in aluminum tariffs. So how does that impact my business or our economy? Well, it impacts the cost of tools. Ford trucks, they are built out of aluminum. But more importantly, speculative pricing. And it's what's next? What's the next tariff? And metal used in construction. A colleague of mine is it builds industrial construction, and since February of last year, the project that he had already financed and already had approved before this tariff, the aluminum price increase for his project has resulted in a $13 per square foot increase in his costs. He is freaking out, and that's just eroding his profits. So speculative pricing is really what's most impactful. It's leading to price increases for items that are already in our supply chain. We're trying to actually adapt to that by developing strategies of actually transitioning away from products derived from China and some of our building products from Canada and Brazil and India. But we don't know if it's going to just be steel and metal. And there's plumbing supplies and different speculations that they're trying to hedge themselves and protect themselves from a loss. And so we're trying to get ahead of the game with that. Economic factors include an impending election that we are starting to hear about daily. But every election's results, there's really a huge psychological doubt that's really impacts sales when there's an impending election. It always improves after the election. Everybody figures out everything's going to be okay. But it does drive doubt. And market improvement. So I tell you, the December little dip in the stock market really had a huge erosion of buyer confidence. And we saw a significant price contract reduction by people fearing their losses of their investments, and an interest rate hike. I really think that social media and news availability 24/7, it just drives just hysteria, and it scares our buyers because we're still historically at low interest rates. Overall, they're very affordable, but we have to be prepared for what kind of interest rate hike is going to happen over the next year. It appears that the Feds are going to take a conservative approach. I think that our economy can accept slow absorption of rates, but we can't absorb a very large increase. But how does that relate to my business? Locally, for example, a 1% rise in interest rate has a 10% buyer affordability impact. So for example, an increase in 1.5 years, let's say over 6 years, will reduce the amount of home a customer can afford by approximately 15%. With today's home prices, that's a pretty large number. And with our lot prices and our affordability factor, that's a scary challenge. But I look at challenges as opportunities. It's such a simple statement, but it's our approach to this market, is how we approach the lessons learned from our downturn and our recession, and how do we come out of that. And when I took my economics class in the MBA program, favorite answer from that professor was like, "It depends." And I look back at that and I laugh, and I use that answer all the time because it just depends. And what happens is if we're right most of the time, and we've got to adapt quickly when we make the mistakes, acknowledge those lessons learned, but most importantly, I think that we have to continue to remember our people, and that our people are our most important asset, and that includes our customers, not only our staff, but our employees and our customers. So many of the great companies that are known for great customer service, well, it's also the companies that treat their employees well, and that transitions to great customer service as well as too. So we're driving to deliver a culture of delivering excellence and always striving to be our best, and we're focused on confidently making it to the playoffs each year, back to the professional sport. We want to earn our trip to the Super Bowl and get one of those grossly overpaid years that we experienced a decade ago. But I started off with the analogy of diamonds as a total internal reflection and the brilliance of a flawless diamond, because I wanted to use the example of something that we can relate to that's flawless. And obviously, our performance is never flawless. As business leaders, we want to constantly strive for excellence and to be our best. And we want to make improvements through accountability. Accountability is key to success throughout the organization, but accountability with the buy-in of our people. And creating that driving desire to be our best and identifying those flaws that can push us towards operational excellence. So I've shared some of the factors from a high level of some of the driving factors of our decision making, but I'd really like to open it up to include a dialogue of making myself available to some questions that if there's any topics you'd like to dig a little deeper in, then I'm available. And
some of the things I'm hearing a lot about is apartments are becoming the norm, and a lot of builders are moving to build apartments. You see them all over popping up, these large apartment complexes, especially downtown. City Line has them. I see them popping up all over the place. Are you seeing that as a trend, and what are you doing about it?
Nothing. that home builders typically focus on home building and their expertise, so we're not looking at that as a transition to entering that market, but I do see the focus of apartments as a transition because of affordability. I mean, there's fewer and fewer people that can afford these newer home prices, and I believe that's a driving factor. Yes.
You mentioned your HERS scoring a while ago a couple times. A couple questions on that. Was that a homegrown rating system? And if so, is it something that you either have had any success or are working towards making it an industry standard?
That's a great question. And the HERS score is actually an industry standard. It's something that's measured that every builder has an independent third-party company that comes, and what they do is they inspect the home at the frame stage before when the insulation is installed, but prior to the sheetrock installation, and they'll do a couple of tests. They'll do a visual test, and they're looking for any possible air penetrations, and they do a test on the ductwork, and they're looking for air leakage on any of the HVAC ductwork, and so that's a beginning part. Another factor of that is, believe it or not, they're counting the windows of a home, the direction the home is facing, and you could have one exact same floor plan facing the north that could have a little bit different HERS score than one that's maybe facing the east, just because of environmental factors. And then that third-party inspector comes back after the home is complete, and they do a blower door test, and they check for room-to-room variances and the balancing, and also any air leakages within the HVAC system or from inside or outside the house. And so that's really what the reason I was mentioning that is the HERS score is a way to identify and to compare what one builder may be doing in comparison to another, because it's the equaling force.
I get that. My question was really, what role in your company, your firm has, if any, in helping keep property?
So the role that our company had, we weren't the driving factor. Again, I'm not going to say my company's name, but we have a lot of commercials on the local ABC network and some radio affiliates. And so we're a partnership with Green Building. And so we chose to make that a part of our marketing plan. And really, because one example, you could have a 2x4 exterior wall and you could have a 2x6 exterior wall. Just because you have more insulation in the 2x6 wall doesn't mean that it's more energy efficient. There's multiple factors that have to come into play, and so the level field is ultimately what's the energy rating score, because one person may try to one salesman may try to make a customer feel that, hey, 2x6 wall is bigger, so it's more efficient, but not necessarily. It's everything that you do inside the wall and the whole system that would determine the overall effectiveness.
Brandon, I just wanted to follow up quickly on how do you spell HER or HERD score? I mean, I thought it was HURD.
HERS.
HERS.
Yes.
It's a HERS score. And what does it stand for? Home Energy
Rating system.
Rating System. Okay, cool. We have a question right here.
So, the real estate homes been like at least 40, 50, 60% increased in price last 4 or 5 years. So what do you think on the, which will impact, the selling houses, the highest, the price? So you think that it's reaching to a steady price now, is gonna stay around whatever, like 180, 90 dollars square foot, or it's gonna keep increasing with the increased demand, people coming to here?
It depends. But truly, it depends in the market. Like I said, that I really believe a big factor in answering your question is the oversaturation. I mentioned earlier in Collin County, in that higher price point, there are too many spec homes, and it's a great time to get a deal in a home. The market will recover, but the growth areas are really determining the prices. There's some areas where the prices aren't as strong, but where another factor that I'll tell you that also drives that is the competition. And if you're in a corridor where there's just a lot of home builders, they're all fighting for the same customer base, and so that will slow down that price increasing a little bit. But unfortunately, I don't like seeing the prices increasing as quickly as they are. I think it's bad. I think that affordability is a true factor. There's not enough people from outside Dallas moving in to afford that, but we all know what we can afford, and there's not a lot of people from outside the area that's just making that much more money to afford these bigger prices. And I would really love to see stabilization of the lot price, because that's the only thing that's going to be able to really at least stabilize the new home sales.
You talked about bottom line versus top line, and you're not looking at cash flow primarily, and so are you avoiding building spec homes in your markets? And are you also publicly owned company, because a lot of those decisions are driven by whether you're public or private, and things like that. So,
Sure. So just to summarize, are you asking about the reasoning of our decisions of whether we build spec homes or build jobs within specific markets? Or
if you're a publicly held company, then you have to maintain certain level of revenue and etc. Whereas if you're privately held, then you can strictly focus on bottom line. So that's what I'm asking. How do you manage to just focus on the bottom line and not build spec homes or make these decisions that you do?
So fortunately, our leadership gives us the latitude it's about driving maximum profitability. And so building spec homes, back to my it depends answer, there's certain markets certain communities where a spec home is all that you're going to sell. Your customer base isn't coming in for all build jobs, and that's your bread and butter. And picking the right house with the right options, the right layout, and the number of bedrooms, and that's my responsibility is to pick those right decisions of the spec homes that we're going to invest in, and then when you figure out what the sales pace is and what that customer base is choosing, what's the optimum level of spec home? Because ideally you don't want to have any of them. You want to sell them before they're complete, but you also want to manage it with an effective pipeline so that you sell one, you replace one, and so part of what we do is we have spec homes, but we have what we call specs on the shelf, and so we've got them already built on paper, we've got them already permitted with the city, so that when we're anticipating a sale, or we're more importantly projecting what our numbers are going to be for each quarter, we may go beyond our comfort level of the number of specs that we want to build because we want to have the availability of homes offered to sell. An example is we're currently in what we call the spring selling season. So historically, around the Super Bowl time, people just start buying houses. And it's a great time of the year because once school gets out, the sales slow down a little bit. People go on vacations, but people are looking at making moves that may have children that they want to be in that before the next school year starts. And so right now is the time of the year where we'll load up on specs because we want that inventory available. But we'll monitor our levels for midsummer and also Thanksgiving and Christmas, that time frame. We'll monitor our levels then too because we don't want too much inventory at that point. Does that answer your question? Publicly, but I've worked at both private and public builders, and I can tell you that our reach of capital is far greater at a public company than with a private.
Yes, so your labor pool is being affected by different factors. So you mentioned that you had standards for your time to completion or different phases of the construction of a home. So how's the labor pool or lack of laborers to do these jobs? How does that affect your standards, your time standards?
So the effect of the labor pool on our projections, our time standards, we evaluate that on a weekly basis, and so our closing commitments to our corporate, I'm essentially afforded the opportunity of being my own business unit, and I've got goals that I have been provided, and then obviously I'm better compensated by exceeding those goals, and so I try to create a pipeline that maximizes the full effect of being able to maximize all those goals. So on a weekly basis, we evaluate with our construction team just who we're having those challenges with, and we create spreadsheets that is projecting. I can pull a report and I can tell you on April 20th how many houses are going to sheetrock on that day, how many electricians are going to be scheduled on any one of our jobs on that day. And so when we identify a problem, we project out and we pre-plan to work through those issues. And so the challenges of the labor force are really a bigger problem with developers and delayed lot delivery. And that's the part that we have no control, because we're buying those lots from the developers. And but we've been able to work through and not have any significant delays currently with our current labor pool.
I'm just curious, how do you prepare, or have you prepared for the inevitable downturn?
We are preparing for that, and transitioning to affordability is our way, and that interest rate changes, the market falling out. We learned from the last time that only being in projects that are in great locations. We want to be in A locations. Before, we might have been in A, B minus, maybe a C. We were willing to be in projects just for cash flow because we were looking for units. And now we don't want a risky project. We would rather have fewer projects with greater profit margins, and that's how we've leveraged ourselves and protected ourselves from the impending recession. A housing recession will happen. I'm scared every day that we're already in it, but we've never forgotten those lessons learned, and that's one thing that I really respect about all of our leadership, and how I've seen so many people that I've worked with that are no longer in my business because maybe they were great, but they didn't make it through those reduction in forces, or they made a bad decision chasing a promotion at another company, and that company went out of business. And I stayed with the same company, and I'm where I am today because of that loyalty. But I can tell you that there's never a day of my work, there's never a work day in any work week that I don't have a conversation about the downturn and what we need to do to protect ourselves of the impending next downturn.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about, there are a lot of homes which are very old, like made in 1950s or 60s. What about them? Is there a future for them, or are they going to just die? What's going to happen?
That's a great question about the old homes, and it's interesting that we think that something that was built in 1950 is old and useless, because in Europe, they live in houses a couple hundred years old. And, so I think that the life cycle of a community is interesting because there's it depends on the market in which they are. Is it what's happening around them? Because I talked about downtown Irving. We're a catalyst to the Heritage District in Irving. Our project was in the southwest kind of point of that area, and that was a revitalization. In the southeast corner there of Irving, in that Heritage District, they built a new community center, a senior citizens community center, and the northwest part of that was a new DART station. And then on the northeast, the northwest, there's a brand new library and a park, and then our project was connected to that park. And so cities were getting involved in trying to drive that area to be revitalized, because I was scared when we started that project because I saw crack deals at the convenience store that you could see from our model home. And we had homeless people that we found asleep in the morning on the porch of our model home. And people were breaking into our spec homes to sleep and take showers at night. But, that's one of the factors that kind of drives the revitalization of some of those older areas. That area is probably homes from the 1940s. But if you drive through there, there's some bad people, but there's a pride of ownership. Maybe it's a different socioeconomic level of a person that lives in that area, but it's not ran down. They take care of what they have. That's just what they can afford. And so in certain areas in Dallas, you'll see house flippers, and the M streets, those houses are really old, but that's one of the most popular places for young people to move to. So it really is dependent upon the location.
Can they be remodeled and rebuilt?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with what I call the bones of the house. You can update it with maybe wiring. You can make it more energy efficient, and then the rest of the parts that you use, your cabinets, your plumbing, and your light fixtures and everything, that those are all replaceable and easily replaced. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with a home built in the 50s, the 40s, or the 30s, or for that matter. Yeah.
How do you all drive, when you mentioned driving the profitability, how do you do that at the contractor level? The guy that's with the hammer and he's installing the nails, he may not care about, what the stock price is for the quarter, whether it goes up or down. So, at that level, I'm sure that's a challenge, but do you guys offer incentives for those contractors, or, how do you create that accountability to get those guys to buy into, what you guys in turn are doing?
The construction managers that are on site daily, and we really don't care if they care about our stock price, because what we care about is them showing up on time when they were asked to show up, and then doing the job right the first time. And so I mentioned our project management scheduling software and how we've integrated the ability of identifying defects of workmanship. If maybe somebody came to install baseboards in a house, but in one room they didn't install any of them. So our staff member could take a picture of that's not installed, and then it's logged in within the schedule, but it sends a message to that contractor saying that we haven't paid you for the work that you have because you haven't completed your work yet. When you come back to complete your defect, then we'll complete the task as complete and process your payment. But that's an example of our field personnel. It's their responsibility to drive that. And interesting enough, when our field personnel has their job site ready, when it's clean, professional looking, and everything's in line for that person to do their job, they're gonna do a good job, because they know that they only get paid when they've completed their job, and they can move on to the next one to get payment. So that's their incentive, to do it right and to hurry up to meet whatever standard we set for them. Because if our field personnel is lackadaisical and just doesn't hold them to a high standard, they won't get the high standard performance.
We have time for one more question. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, cool. Well, Brandon, I think you did a great job. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.